The rain hammered against the cracked pavement as Vivian Hartley pulled her tattered coat tighter around her shoulders, watching her own breath fog in the cold October air. Nobody walking past this diner window would have guessed that the woman huddled beneath the flickering street lamp, hair matted, hands trembling, shoes held together with duct tape, was actually the CEO of a $3 billion tech empire. That was exactly the point. If this story about kindness and second chances is speaking to you already, hit that like button, drop a comment below, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House, because what happens next will remind you why decency still matters in this world. Vivian had built Hartley Dynamics from nothing, clawing her way through boardrooms full of men who underestimated her, until she sat atop an empire worth more than some small countries. But success had cost her everything else. Every man who'd ever approached her saw dollar signs before they saw her face. Fiancés who vanished the moment prenups were mentioned. Dates who spent entire dinners talking about her stock portfolio instead of her dreams. At 34, she'd made a decision that her board would have called insane. She would disappear into the city she'd conquered, dressed as someone with nothing, and find out if a single soul would treat her with genuine kindness when there was nothing to gain. 3 weeks into her experiment, she'd learned the cruelest lessons of her life. She'd been shoved off sidewalks, spat at outside restaurants she used to be welcomed into with red carpets, and ignored by security guards who once called her ma'am with trembling respect. Her heart had grown heavier with each rejection, each proof that humanity's kindness was, perhaps, only ever transactional. That night, hunger gnawing at her stomach, she pushed open the door of a small diner called Rosalind's, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop on the edge of downtown. The bell above the door jingled, and every head turned. She felt the familiar wave of judgment wash over her, until she saw him. Theodore Banks was wiping down the counter when she walked in, and unlike everyone else, his eyes didn't narrow with suspicion or slide away in discomfort. He looked at her the way he looked at every customer who walked through that door, like she mattered. He was maybe 36, with tired eyes that still held warmth, forearms that spoke of years of hard work, and a gentleness in his movements that seemed almost out of place in a world that had grown so sharp. "Evening," he said, grabbing a menu. "Booth by the window just opened up, and it's got the best view of the rain. Best seat in the house, if you ask me." Vivian froze. "I don't have money," she admitted quietly, bracing for the inevitable dismissal. Theodore didn't even blink. "Didn't ask you for any. Sit down before you catch a cold." He guided her to the booth as if she were the most important guest he'd ever served, then disappeared into the kitchen. Minutes later, he returned with a steaming bowl of soup, fresh bread, and a mug of hot chocolate, foods he hadn't rung up on any register. "I can't pay you back," she whispered, her voice cracking with an emotion she hadn't expected. "Didn't ask you to," he said simply, sliding into the booth across from her for just a moment, glancing toward the kitchen where a small boy, no older than 7, sat coloring at a corner table, occasionally glancing up at his father with adoring eyes. "That's my son, Oliver. His mother left when he was 2. It's just us now. And I figure, in a world that's already cold enough, the least I can do is make sure nobody leaves my diner hungry or feeling invisible." Something inside Vivian shifted that night, a crack in the armor she'd built around her heart for over a decade. She returned to Rosalind's the next evening, and the one after that. Theodore never asked why a homeless woman kept coming back with slightly less desperation in her eyes each time, or why she watched him with a curiosity that bordered on wonder. He simply kept being kind, kept saving her the best booth, kept sneaking Oliver's crayon drawings across the table to make her smile. Over the following weeks, Vivian learned the quiet tragedy of Theodore's life. He'd once been an engineer with dreams of designing bridges that would outlive him, but when his wife abandoned him and baby Oliver, he'd taken the diner job because it offered flexible hours and let him bring his son along during evening shifts when daycare wasn't an option. He worked double shifts, slept 4 hours a night, and never once complained. He gave free meals to elderly customers on fixed incomes, let struggling mothers run tabs he quietly forgave, and treated every person, rich or poor, clean or disheveled, with the same unwavering respect. One rainy Tuesday evening, Vivian watched as a well-dressed businessman stormed into the diner, berating Theodore over a wrong order with cruel, condescending words that echoed her own boardroom nightmares. Theodore didn't raise his voice. He simply apologized, remade the order himself, and even offered the man a slice of pie on the house, not out of weakness, but out of a strength Vivian had never witnessed in any man wearing an expensive suit. That night, walking back to the shelter she'd been staying at to maintain her disguise, she cried for the first time in years, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that she'd finally found what she'd been searching for. But fate, as it often does, had one more test waiting. Oliver fell seriously ill one evening, a raging fever that wouldn't break, his small body trembling on the diner's back booth because Theodore couldn't afford to leave work and couldn't afford the emergency room bill that would follow. Vivian watched the panic in Theodore's eyes, the desperate calculations of a father choosing between his son's health and his ability to pay next month's rent. Without thinking, without revealing who she truly was, she grabbed the diner's landline and called a number only she knew, her personal physician, Dr. Amara Whitfield, who arrived within 20 minutes, no questions asked, and treated Oliver with quiet professionalism before slipping away. "How did you?" Theodore started, staring at Vivian with a confusion that made her stomach twist with guilt. "I know people," she said simply, unable to meet his eyes. That night, holding a now sleeping, fever-free Oliver in his arms, Theodore looked at Vivian with something that broke her heart completely open. "You've given us more than you know," he whispered. "I don't care that you have nothing. You've shown up for us in a way most people with everything never do." Vivian knew then that she couldn't hide anymore. The next morning, she returned to Rosalind's not in rags, but in a tailored charcoal suit, her hair styled, her presence commanding the kind of attention that made the entire diner fall silent. Theodore stared at her from behind the counter, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and finally, a wounded betrayal that made her chest ache. "I'm Vivian Hartley," she said, her voice trembling for the first time in years of boardroom battles. "CEO of Hartley Dynamics. I dressed as someone with nothing because I needed to know if anyone would treat me like I mattered without knowing what I could give them. You did that, Theodore. Every single day, without hesitation, without asking for anything in return." Theodore's jaw tightened, hurt flashing across his features. So this whole time, this was some kind of test. "It started that way," she admitted. "But somewhere between that first bowl of soup and watching you love your son so fiercely, it stopped being a test and started being real. I fell for the man who gave a stranger dignity when he had every reason not to." The silence that followed felt like it stretched across an eternity. Then Theodore, still holding Oliver's small hand, asked the only question that mattered: was any of it real? The conversations, the way you looked at Oliver, the way you looked at me? "All of it," Vivian whispered. "Every single moment was real." If this story has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and share it with someone who needs to believe that kindness still finds its way back to good people. It truly means the world to this channel. Before we reach the ending, I have one special request. Comment the word kindness below if you believe that genuine goodness deserves to be rewarded, no matter how long it takes. Theodore didn't answer with words. Instead, he walked around the counter, Oliver's small hand still wrapped in his, and pulled Vivian into an embrace that held more honesty than any boardroom deal she'd ever negotiated. Oliver, sandwiched between them, giggled and declared that he liked her better in the raggedy clothes, because she smiled more back then. Vivian laughed through tears, promising she'd smile just as much from now on. In the months that followed, Vivian didn't whisk Theodore away into a world of penthouses and private jets that would have swallowed the man she loved. Instead, she invested in Rosalind's, expanding it into a small chain that still served free meals to anyone who needed them, still hired single parents who needed flexible hours, and still felt like home to anyone who walked through its doors. Theodore kept working the counter most days, not because he had to, but because he loved it, and because Oliver loved growing up surrounded by warmth instead of luxury. Vivian Hartley had spent years searching for someone who wanted her, not her empire. She found him wiping down a diner counter, treating a homeless stranger like royalty, teaching his son that kindness costs nothing but means everything. And in the end, that was worth more than every dollar she'd ever earned.